Today, guys, we have Jack Perez. He's one of our athletes that started working with us last year. He's really about nutritional and optimal wellness. Um, and he's going to talk a little bit about how he navigates nutrition and bodybuilding and different stuff like that. So welcome to the show, I guess, Jack.
Appreciate having coming on. Yeah, I made a few notes to go over, but yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to like Q&A style things too.
Yeah, for sure. So if you guys have any questions, drop them in the chat below, and then we'll get to them as we go, and then we'll just have you guys ask the questions from Jack directly. So, yeah, Jack, why don't you just start off a little bit about yourself and kind of how you started on fitness and what got you into it? Because you're a young guy, you're still in college, and we just love to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, definitely. So I think it probably goes back for a lot of people, stems from just like athletics as a kid, kind of just doing like the group soccer leagues growing up. Dad was a coach, and then kind of found the groove of okay, like what sports that I kind of like, and that kind of led to high school sports where I kind of first, I guess, got an actual gym. I don't think I touched a weight until probably high school, and we just had to for sports. So that was kind of one of those things where it was like I didn't really know what the gym was like as far as training, resistance training, anything like that until high school sports, high school coaches, stuff like that. And then I kind of noticed I actually look forward to those kind of training sessions. Like, even though they were, once again, like 6 a.m. before school started, you had to go wake up early, shower before school, stuff like that. Kind of fell in love with the weights. And then when eventually high school sports kind of fell off, continued on my own through college, just going to the gym regularly, trying to stay in shape. And then that eventually turned into a passion for bodybuilding. And then that kind of led to the last couple of years as far as taking it a little bit more seriously, as far as training, nutrition, dialing things in, and then learning as I go too.
Cool. So did you, when you started out, like what was kind of the click for you that caused you to want to jump into, I mean, I guess it's a journey, right? But like what can you think of like that aha moment you had where you're like,
Yeah.
school is cool, but maybe I want to
Yeah.
try this fitness
I would
influencer thing.
say, honestly, probably started way back in high school when I noticed like the physique change. I was probably my license probably was like 5'6", a buck 25, like 125 pounds. Like I was small. So I think the big change started happening when like, oh, I started to eat more, train more, actually saw like the physical change that obviously once again was beneficial for the sport. Then also was like, oh, this is kind of cool. Like I've like developed a good physique. I've kind of like built that up. And then kind of got to the point where I was like, okay, like this is something where I take a lot of pride in it. Like no one can do it for you. You can't inherit your physique. You can't like just rent it or borrow it. Something you have to like pay dues for continually. And it's something that takes a lot of time and effort. I think it shows like discipline about the person. And I kind of took that as like, okay, if I want to be like a disciplined person the rest of my life, I think health and fitness is a good place to start and then kind of continue to grow the physique. And then that kind of what's I would say led to my passion was like just building the physique, the muscle, the looks that I kind of never had or kind of wanted when I was growing up, the small, scrawny kid at like literally 120 pounds, soaking wet, freshman year of high school, that kind of thing.
Yeah, cool. And so when you kind of figured out what you wanted to do, what did you know what like how to get into fitness? I mean, I hear that a lot. Like, I mean, I've been in fitness my whole life, so I don't really think about it. But then like when I took my wife's a runner, but then when she moved, we got married recently, and then she moved out here to Las Vegas, where we're based. Taking her to the gym for the first time was like this like overwhelming, like
Sure.
intimidating experience, which I thought was always silly because I'm like, what's intimidating about the gym? But then I
Yeah.
realized with her, it's like you literally like just like a little kid just like stepping into like a new room where you're like, what do all these weird things do? Like how
Yeah.
do I use my leg on this? Do I use my hand? Like what was that kind of like for you?
Yeah, it was YouTube University. And I'll say that, I mean, that's kind of what got me into the health and fitness space in general was like, and why I kind of started creating content. Like I watched YouTube videos for, I mean, probably a solid decade before I actually made my own. Back once again when it was like the 6 minute abs I was trying to get, or eventually turned into okay, like the more science-based stuff, watching guys like Lane Norton, Jeff Nippard, more like the scientific kind of like YouTube creators. And I kind of wanted to have a little bit of a different twist where it's like not just strictly educational but a little bit more kind of like educational, informative, entertaining. But I was an avid consumer of whether it be podcasts or whether it be YouTube videos, which then turned into more so like scientific studies than reading like the literature on it and the I would say the more kind of like nerding out about it. But it all started with just like YouTube University, like, yeah, how do I train? How should I eat? That kind of started it, and then eventually kind of rolled into like a personal training license, which rolled into like some more like nutritional background, stuff like that. And I kind of got into the weeds with it. And last, I would probably say 5 years or so, when I kind of was like, oh, I'm like actually subscribing to like mass economics and getting these studies and reading like a little bit more than just like surface level, like YouTube from back in the day, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. I guess let's dive into the nutrition a little bit. So, what's your background in nutrition? Like, are you going to school for it? Is it kind of self-taught?
Yeah, so
what's
it's more self-taught. I did do a nutrition course, which it was one of those things where it's like you get like certified for 2 years, and I just like, like I was certified, and then they just wanted you to pay more money to kind of keep that like license or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So it was one of those things where it was more self-taught, and then I eventually got like a nutrition certification. So not like a dietitian or didn't go to school for it, but took like an online course. And that was one of those things where it's like, okay, it was cool, learned a lot, and then just self-taught from there as far as working with like myself, personal clients, experience with like family and friends. That also, once again, when I first started, it was like I was working with people for free. I was like paying some people, hey, like come work with me. I want to learn more about this stuff. And then doing it for free for a while, just to learn, okay, like what do I kind of like know personally, but how does that apply to someone else who's like, once again, like I only know my specific situation of being like a high school, college athlete, but then what about someone who works 9 to 5, has 1 or 2 kids, like their experience can be very, very different than what mine is. Even though the science is the same as we're all humans, there's going to be very different applications of that to like a person and their like real life, that kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess when you approach nutrition stuff with your clients and stuff, how do you do it when it comes to the different body types, different lifestyles, all that stuff? Because like I've noticed lately, like I don't know what happened for me, but like I went from being like, you know, really lean to putting on weight, and then it's just like no matter what type of deficit I do, it just feels like it's not really coming off. Now, granted, I understand calories in, calories out, whatever, but at 36, almost 37, it's like I definitely can see a difference in my body and the way that I metabolize things, and
Mhm.
I don't burn fat the way I used to. You know what I mean? Like, and granted, my cardio and everything has changed throughout the years, from running 50 miles a week to now, last week I ran like 22, you know what I mean? Like, so it
Sure.
can fluctuate pretty widely. And so that like, I've always had this kind of judgmental thing of like, oh yeah, people don't like it's calories in, calories out. Like if you're not losing weight, it's just strictly because you're just eating too much. But that's
Yeah,
that's clearly not the case with a lot of people. So how do you
definitely.
approach that with people, or how do you encourage people when they're hitting plateaus and different stuff to not just be like, screw it. You know what I mean? Because it's very motivating when you see the weight coming off the scale. It's
Exactly.
super depressing when you look at the scale every day and you're looking at
That's
your
what's
weekly
happening.
averages and nothing changes.
Yeah. So I guess kind of looping back to like the start as far as like my approach is, once again, like it is founded in science as far as like I'll always say like the kind of steps, I guess you call it. It's like step one or base level one is just our basic like I guess energy balance, caloric intake, that kind of calories in, calories out is like a good basis to start at. But then it's like, okay, what about like your protein intake? What about those micronutrients? Like, are we hitting protein? Is it just a matter of like, because I think everyone's heard that study where it's like some guy ate like Twinkies and McDonald's and like lost weight or whatever because of like he ate under his calories. But like in the real world, like how long could you stick with that? Like maybe a week,
Right.
and then you're like, screw this, this sucks, like whatever. You have absolutely no nutritional value, no micronutrients, anything like that. So I would say, once again, it does still start with that energy balance, and then like kind of like your macros. Like what about your protein intake? Because that increased, decreased satiation levels in terms of like our actual food that we're intaking. Then the micronutrients come into play a little bit above that. Like if you're consistently hitting like a calorie mark and a protein mark, okay, what about micronutrients? Are you getting your fiber in? What about your daily like potassium? Some of those other like vitamins and minerals we need for, once again, good sleep, like magnesium at the end of the night. Little things like that to fill in the gaps. And then comes into nutritional timing. It's kind of like after that, it's like, okay, you fueling your workouts? Do you maybe do any sort of intermittent fasting? Do you feel like you are a grazer? You kind of eat a little bit throughout the day. And then the very top, I would say, is like the supplements. If like, once again, a protein, I consider like a protein shake more of like a food source, but things like, once again, like creatine, maybe some caffeine, stuff like that would be at like the very top of the pyramid. But I do think, once again, all of that comes down to adherence and lifestyle. So I could talk about calories, protein, macronutrients, micronutrients all day, but if it doesn't fit, once again, someone's lifestyle and they don't have an adherence to it, that kind of, you can kind of throw all the science out the window. It doesn't matter because the person doesn't care, right? You can have all the facts, but if you can't implement it, that's what really comes down to what I'll say is like with my coaching specifically is like there's a very big difference between like a bodybuilder on prep like me last year versus once again a parent who has two kids, works a 9 to 5. Like I could eat 5 meals a day, no problem. For them, 5 meals a day is ridiculous. The amount of dishes they would have, the amount of feeding windows they would have. They would have to eat breakfast, lunch, pre-workout, post-workout, dinner. Like it doesn't make sense. So we kind of
Yeah.
break it down and say, okay, like how many meals could they today? What would be actually something that they could adhere to in the long term? Is it 2 meals a day, 3 meals a day? Is it 2 meals on their own, one big dinner with their family? Whatever it is, kind of fit like their lifestyle. So it's more of like working backwards and say, okay, what could they do? And then we kind of fill in the gaps. Okay, let's make sure we have adequate protein with every meal. Let's go ahead and pick our protein sources. What kind of foods do people like? Some people hate chicken breast. They've always been told chicken breast, but like there's other lean proteins out there. I mean, shrimp is an extremely lean protein. I personally wish I liked shrimp more because it is so lean, like things like white fish. And I think people get these kind of just they get a little too narrow in the sense like, oh yeah, I heard that you have to eat chicken, rice, and broccoli, and that's it. Where the goal of kind of like my nutritional approach is no, there's so many other options out there. It's just a matter of what you prefer as well as what you can kind of fit into your life. It's a combination of, oh, like cooking a steak every night, taking 30 minutes to brine it, have it come up to room temp, then grilling it. It's gonna be different than, okay, popping in maybe just ready to go chicken that you bought from Trader Joe's. That's gonna take a minute to cook. So it's one of those things where the science is there, but it's a lot of kind of making it fit for someone's lifestyle and then what they can adhere to in the long term. Because the consistency and the time is going to be the greatest like advantage to anyone following any kind of diet. So I think lifestyle comes in probably more than any of the science does because science only takes you so far if you can't adhere to it.
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, I think that currently we're in a strange kind of culture where it's like you have all this information coming at you from social media about nutrition. And it's just like if you watched exclusively Paul Saladino, you know what I mean? He
Yeah.
tells you, don't touch vegetables, they're poisonous for you. You know what I mean? And then maybe you
Mhm.
watch Gary Brecka and he tells you, well, some vegetables are okay for you, but I tend to stay away from, most vegetables. And then you got other guys like, Bio Lane who are on the other side of things who are like just data focused and that's it. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there's no room for nuance. It's like, is it bad for you by the data? No. So it's okay. And it's like, there's definitely an in between there. Right.
Yeah.
And so it kind of becomes this thing of like what you said, like, what do you think is the most, for somebody who's trying to stay lean or at least slowly lean down, do you think like, for example, like protein is the best thing to focus on? Like, okay, I need to hit like a specific amount of protein every day. Because I think that's probably the thing that most people in the gym, especially women, are not hitting is their protein intake
100%.
intake and
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. So if you want to touch on that, that'd be awesome. I'd love to
Yeah,
hear your
most
thoughts.
definitely. Yeah, as far as protein goes, I mean, once again, I feel like we talk about the subject for a long time as far as the science behind it, but protein is basically like what allows your body to have muscle protein synthesis occur, which is basically going to be growing muscle. So if your goal is to build some muscle, you need some protein. That's like the building blocks. I will say when you are in like a building phase, you can get away with a little bit less protein typically because carbs and fats are considered protein sparing when you have a surplus. So it's one of those things where a lot of times you'll hear people talk about like, oh, when you're in a cut, your protein should actually go up, or you should hit at least 1 gram per pound of body weight. Because when you're in a cut, it's a little bit less. You have all those carbs that are used for energy, and then basically have the protein as a building blocks. But when you start to bring those energy levels down in the calorie deficit, you need more protein because your body just needs that muscle protein synthesis, needs to be constantly kind of in a fed state with protein, but it's also very satiating. So as far as like macronutrients go, and then you can throw alcohol in the macronutrients too. A lot of people do, but like as far as like carbs versus fats versus protein versus alcohol, it is by far the most satiating. So the more protein you have, typically less person has like less cravings, they're more satiated. And then once again, protein just takes a little bit longer time to digest as well. So it's going to keep you a little bit more full in terms of, once again, I would say like the calorie value versus once again, like a handful of nuts that are pure fat or a beer, something like that, just going to be just empty calories, basically. I don't love the word empty, but essentially
Right.
calories that are not going to have any benefit for keeping you satiated or any sort of, once again, like the amino acids in the proteins that are going to help with the building blocks of muscle, stuff like that. So I've most of my lifestyle clients, we just focus on calories and protein. That is it, because I want them to have the flexibility to say, oh, honestly, I'm craving a little bit more carbs today. I want some pasta or I want some rice or whatever it is. And if they feel, I feel blocked into like, oh, you can only have so many carbs because we have a fat goal as well, they feel restricted. And that's what causes them to, once again, break what we'll call, I guess, like their quote unquote diet. And then it's the all in one mentality of like, oh, I already missed my carbs today. Screw calories, screw protein,
Yeah.
screw everything else. Where it's like, oh, yeah, if you're craving more carbs, your body's going to have different cravings. So go ahead and increase your carbs a little bit and you just have to drop your fat down to make sure that your calories and protein are still on point. So I think for the majority of people, unless once again you're maybe like a specific sport athlete, a bodybuilder, whatever it is, calories and protein should be king. And you let your carbs and fats kind of fluctuate to once again your lifestyle, your preferences, your cravings. And then once again, if like your wife or husband wants to go out for Italian dinner on your anniversary, like don't worry about having more carbs that night or that day or that week if once again your calories and proteins are still on point, stuff like that.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, I'll segue that into this question then. And I, I'm sure a lot of people have this same struggle is like, for me, it's like, you know, I got married in September and now it's like my wife makes dinner a lot of times.
Mhm.
It's like I have to be like, I don't know how to track this. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So it's like my thing right now is like I don't want to be super like sitting there weighing out, separating the vegetables from the meat and trying to figure out exactly what it is that I'm eating because I've done
sure.
that for years and it just becomes just so like mind numbing, especially
Mhm.
when you're not doing like a prep for like a bodybuilding thing, which I'll never do. I don't have the
Sure.
mentality you guys do to be, you know, as lean as you guys get, which is nuts. And so nuts in a good way. Like I can't believe you guys do it. But like I also am like my thing is like I'm trying to focus more just like on hitting protein specifically, like not even worrying about even tracking the rest of the calories because I know if I hit like 200 grams of protein a day, right?
Yeah.
I'm not and I'm not eating Snickers bars, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
not gonna have a lot of room for other food. You know what I mean? So
For sure.
like, do you with your clients and stuff, do you kind of how do you keep them out of the weeds, I guess is the question when it gets into being like super like hyper focused on the calories because
Yeah.
it can be consuming, to be honest.
Definitely. Yeah. So a couple things. So first off, as like I'm kind of going through that experience right now with once again of like basically I'm having a little bit of flexibility with my building phase to go untracked one meal a day. And that's just once again for the fact that I'm in a building phase and a surplus, stuff like that. But for most of my clients, it's very similar where yeah, they're like their wife or husband is cooking dinner, they come home from work and it's kind of what it is. So a couple big things I think once again with you having tracked in the past, it does allow you to kind of earn the right to not have to track everything, right? Because in the past, you kind of like were tracking everything. You mentioned weighing things out using the food scale. So you probably have a pretty good idea of like what about 6 ounces of chicken breast looks like or what a cup of vegetables looks like. So that's a bit different when I have a client that has never tracked in their entire life. They do a really, they struggle with trying to eyeball things and guesstimate because
Yeah,
they've never tracked before versus
right.
someone like yourself who has tracked and had probably tracked for a while like myself, like we can look at something like, oh yeah, that's about 5 to 6 ounces of chicken breast. Okay, that's probably a cup and a half of rice. And then okay, we're gonna add like 2 tablespoons of some sauce, which is probably gonna be like, I don't know, maybe 10 grams of fat in macros. So like we can kind of eyeball that and guesstimate. And once again, if like your goal is just to slim down, stay lean, whatever it is, you can probably get away with that. But if they have a very specific goal that's like trying to get ready for a wedding or something like that, then we probably need to dial things in a little bit more. And I have like what I call the hand method. So you probably heard of basically like a palm size or a closed fist thing of protein. I would say about a thumb of fat. So that can be like any sort of sauce or like butters or oils or anything like that. I'm gonna go. I give my clients 2 handfuls of some sort of like starchy carb. Typically, once again, for dinner time, they probably have a little bit more food if they're post workout, especially. So whether it be rice, potatoes, sweet potatoes, anything like that, and then I'll do like I just say like a handful or about a cup of a given fruits or vegetable. So that's kind of a rough way to kind of estimate that. Most of the time, it's going to be right around like a 400 to 600 calorie meal, depending on the person. And then we kind of work things in and say, okay, hey, like if you track the first 2 meals of the day and like your post workout meal, okay, like one meal untracked or like kind of eyeballing it, it's not going to be in the world because even tracking has its kind of errors and like slight differentiation depending on like the nutrition label and stuff like that. So I would say the biggest thing there is realizing that you kind of have to earn the right to not track by tracking. So you have a good idea of,
Right.
okay, yeah, like you can see a meal like, oh, like steak, potatoes, and some broccoli on the side. I know that this is going to be about 40 to 50 grams of protein. The fat's a little bit higher because it's a fattier strip of steak. The mashed potatoes about a cup and a half, stuff like that. So it's more eyeballing it versus like just not tracking whatsoever. I do think if you have a specific goal, especially with the fat loss, you still need to have some kind of awareness of what you're consuming. And it can't just be like, oh, like one free meal every single night, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Um, what is your thoughts on, and I thought about this and I wanted to ask you this question is, well, one is, what is your thoughts on IFYM? If it
Yeah,
fits,
if it's your macro.
IFYYM, like it always seems to
Yeah.
way over guesstimate.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Because they'll be like, oh, because I work out generally 6 days a week, I might run 10 to 15, 20 miles a week with lifting and stuff in there. Like, it'll be like, oh, you need 3,000 calories a day. Well, no, I know that for sure because when I was running 50 miles a week, I only ate 2,700 a day. So, like, I know for sure that that's not
Yeah,
accurate and it tends
definitely.
to way overestimate it. So, what's your recommendation for people who don't have the ability or the financial ability to have a trainer and a nutritionist and be like, what's a good place to start? You know what I mean? Do you recommend looking up their BMR or what? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I think once again, as far as a starting point, nothing's gonna be perfect. I think it's once again whether you take the if it fits your macros approach or like the TDEE calculator online, whatever it is, it's just gonna give you a ballpark guess. But it's a good starting point where you can go ahead and say, okay, this is what it's telling me I should around be consuming. Whether that once again be something where you can go ahead and put a little bit. I think most for the most part people overestimate how active they are. Like I'll have a client tell me, yeah, like I'm like super active. I work out 4 times a week. And it's like, oh, well, like, what's your job? It's like, oh, I have a desk job. I'm an accountant, and then, but I go to the gym. And it's like, no, the overactive or the extremely active is like a construction worker who's on his feet doing a labor intensive
Right,
job
like an
8 hours a day.
Amazon warehouse person who's walking
Exactly. Someone who's on
20,000
their
steps
feet
a day.
constantly
Yeah,
walking
yeah,
around, maybe like a nurse in a hospital who's constantly moving around, walking all day, something like that. But I do think that people tend to overestimate, I guess, how active they are. But the second part would just be take that number and just start there and track your weight. So I think that's a really important thing where you take, once again, it might be 2 or 3 weeks where you kind of just like are in this limbo, but you take those 2 or 3 weeks and then you say, okay, I can confirm at this calorie amount, I'm in a surplus, I'm at maintenance, or I'm at a deficit. And then that 2 or 3 weeks of kind of like experimenting with your own body will allow you to then have the next 2 or 3 months, if not 2 or 3 years of understanding, okay, like at this point in my life with this job, this general kind of like workout or lifestyle, these are around my calories. And this is how I can kind of fluctuate those. Because once again, it's not ideal. There's no perfect answer, but you can get an answer by taking the time to track your calories, track your weight, and see, okay, in the last 2 or 3 weeks, has my weight gone up or gone down? Okay, that's gonna give us a good idea. Okay, we were in a surplus, we we're in a deficit, and then you can make the changes from there. But I think a lot of times people like start and then like a week later they see that their weight went up or went down, and it's almost too quick because weight fluctuates for all kinds of reasons, right? Like water
right.
weight, sodium intake, sleep, like how well we slept, if we once again use the restroom in the morning. Number one, number two, like there are a lot of things that fluctuate. So you need at least, I'd say, 2 or 3 weeks of data to confirm, okay, these were some outliers. My weight fluctuated the first week because I never tracked my calories before. So I just automatically ate a little bit less because I was aware of what I was intaking versus I happen all the time with clients. They just like start basically like tracking and they automatically eat less than they already were because they're aware of what they're putting in their body that they have to
Right.
track
Yeah.
it. So it's one of those things where it's just going to take some experimentation. The fact that once again, you're going to sacrifice 2 to 3 weeks of not knowing exactly what you need to do, but then you'll know exactly what you need to do after those 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay. What are your thoughts? This is very controversial. What
Mhm.
are your thoughts on net carbs?
I'm not a fan personally. I think that there is a time and a place for net carbs in the sense that if you are, I won't say over consuming, but if you are consuming a
Explain,
lot.
explain what net carbs are really quick, just
Yeah.
so that we don't
So
assume
essentially net
everybody
carbs
here
are,
knows
yeah. So on
what it is.
nutrition labels, you'll see like I wish I'd want to pull up right now, but essentially you'll see the carbs
Like
and then
Quest
you'll see,
bars.
yeah, exactly. Quest bars. You'll see like the number of carbs and you'll see like it's like sometimes sugar alcohol, it's sometimes fiber and stuff like that. And basically what the I think it's more of a like a marketing tactic for companies to say they have less carbs than they do. That's why I kind of like don't love
Yeah.
it. But essentially they'll say the sugar alcohols that they added as well as the fiber in the bar are quote unquote non soluble fibers or sorry, non-soluble carbs. So like your body actually isn't absorbing those carbs and using them as energy. So they go ahead and just remove those from the actual calories so they can bump down the calories on their product, whatever they're trying to move. So I personally am not a huge fan of the net carbs because I think it gives people a misconception of how much they're intaking, but also the fact that it's just a marketing tactic by those companies to once again tell you like, oh, you're actually eating less food than you are. When yes, fiber, like once again, is insoluble and sometimes sugar alcohols are, but there also is some energy being pulled from those. It's not just straight going through your body. There is a little
Right.
bit. It's not going to be as much as it was if it was a soluble carb, but I don't think net carbs are beneficial in the sense that you can just like eat all the fiber and sugar alcohols you want and then not count those towards any of your calories whatsoever. But yeah, I think it's more of a marketing tactic and something that they kind of try to do to get away with like the FDA as far as like allowing them to have lower calorie amounts on their foods and on their packaging, stuff like that, nutrition labels.
Yeah, and I mean, as most people do or don't know, but it's like nutrition labels can be up to 20% either way in
Exactly.
calories. So like you could, I mean, I've always thought of it as like you're probably overeating. Like you're probably
For
there's
sure.
you're always generally, especially when you're in a cut, you're generally gonna be like, you know, oh, I don't need to count the creamer unless it's like you who's, trying to do, gets really into it the way you do with preparing for a prep. It's like it's not gonna hurt you to lose, you know what I mean, to count the actual carbs. You know what I mean? Like it's
Exactly.
probably gonna be better. You're gonna find a better balance there for sure on that.
Yeah, and there's no need to I think it overcomplicates it a lot. It adds like another step or like another complex kind of, I guess, equation you could call it that someone has to like kind of sort through on their own, which I don't think is always the best to overcomplicate things in that regard. And yeah, as you mentioned, like having that meal, whatever your wife makes for dinner, like there's already some inaccuracy built into tracking, even when you do scan the barcode and weigh everything out. Because once again, they can have that inaccuracy about 20% on the labels and the FDA will allow it. Like there's always inaccuracies in what we do, but it's like, okay, but like, are we actually being consistent with like general protein intake, eating a little bit healthier, having some more fruits and vegetables, stuff like that, where the exact like down to the gram, I will say once again, unless you're going to step on a bodybuilding stage, you don't need to stress it or stress having a meal that you can't track perfectly or weigh out every gram, stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. No, that's cool. Let's jump into, before we get to some questions, let's jump into like, I don't know, tell us about your bodybuilding, how you kind of prep for that. Like, I'm curious to know how you deal with hunger and those things. And I think most people in general, especially in America, have some type of food, I don't want to say addiction as much as like reliance, you know what I
Sure.
mean, on the flavor of food. Cause like I talk to my wife about this all the time. It's like if I eat 10 ounces of ground beef, right? I don't eat it and go, oh my gosh, I want more ground beef. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like if I eat one of those white chocolate pretzels from
Oh
Costco that
yeah.
comes out every year with the peppermint on it, it's
Oh yeah.
literally like a switch in my brain goes, screw it. You could eat this whole bag right now and
Yeah.
just retract tomorrow. And
Yeah.
that's, I
Yogurt
mean,
covered pretzels.
yeah,
But
it's
yeah.
the sugar is just I mean, it's a literal drug. And I think that's
Yeah.
like, I struggle with that every day where I'm like, it's like, I'm eating enough calories, but it's like, yeah, but are blueberries sweet enough? You know what I mean? So
Not.
like, how do you
Yeah.
kind of, how do you kind of navigate? Do you kind of just grit and bear it, or what's kind of your process for that?
Yeah, so a couple of things. Funny enough, I saw a video, of course, on Instagram where I forget what the guy's name is, but it was like he was holding up like an ice cream bar, and he's like, "This is like I don't know if I can cuss, like this is crap, but like eat this." And he holds up like an egg. I'm like, who in their right mind thinks that a good substitute for an ice cream sandwich is an
Right.
egg? Like it
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense. Like in the real world, like there's no application where someone turns down ice cream to go for like a hard boiled egg. It doesn't make any sense. But I do think in general, like the deck is kind of stacked against us in the sense that these corporations, now once again, I'll say this and I'll move on, but like they are billion-dollar corporations who are trying to make a profit for their shareholders. They don't care about you and I. They don't care about our health. They don't care about how much sugar we intake. All they care about is how much money we spend and building a product that is extremely palatable, extremely easy to overconsume, and something that they can hopefully kind of get you addicted to so you buy more of their
Yeah.
product. And I don't think people realize that and have that separation of like, oh, like these people that once again, like Peyton Manning on the Lay's commercial eating chips and drinking Pepsi or whatever it is. Like they see that and like, oh, okay, like if he does it, I can do it. Like it's fine. But like they have
Yeah.
marketing teams with billion-dollar budgets by like Coca-Cola, Lay's, whatever it is, to make these products taste really damn good, make them very palatable, and then also like relatively cheap for the average consumer. Like, oh, a bag of chips, like that's not that expensive because like relative to
Right.
once again a high quality beef or some good whole foods or the produce, stuff like that. So in general, I think the deck is stacked against us, and it's something we kind of have to be aware of. And like once again, like they're just trying to take our money so they can have a bigger profit margin for their shareholders. They don't care about any of us and our health or anything like that. So that's kind of like always in the back of my mind. I try to tell everyone I talk to, like once again, it's a little kind of like what's the right word? Um
Conspiracy.
yeah, it's a little like kind of conspiracy, but like you look at the like the data, and it's like it's there. Like they are a publicly traded business, and all they want to do is make more money. And so whether that be once again from making us fat and having us want to eat more Doritos, hey, so be it. They don't really care. Um, but yeah,
Yeah,
so as
yeah.
far as my bodybuilding,
It's not conspiracy at all. I think
yeah,
we listen to maybe some of the same podcasts. So
yeah,
you hear it over and over again on a lot of like whether it's, you know, the JRE podcast or, you know, other fitness, like fitness, maybe a Chris Williamson podcast or even a Huberman podcast, whatever it is. It's like they are constantly saying like, you like guys, these are all owned by Vanguard. They're all owned by BlackRock. Like they all like they're and it understandably so. Their investment is to their clientele, and unfortunately, it's at the expense of our health. So I
yeah.
just want to jump in and say it doesn't sound conspiracy at all. I just think it's just true. So anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. I think there's millions of examples out there for once again, like whether they use celebrities or they use people that are in shape and show that you can eat whatever it is.
Right.
But yeah, so I mean, once again, I think you kind of take that for what it is and say, like, yeah, the deck is stacked against me. Sometimes it's not even just like the marketing, but also like the environment we kind of put ourselves in. So as far as my bodybuilding prep, so quick overview. I went ahead and did my first ever bodybuilding prep last year. I actually started February 1st of 2023. So almost exactly a year ago, I started prep and I did a 9-month prep in which I lost about 30 pounds. So I went from
Wow.
right around 180, 182, 183 AM fasted weigh-ins down to a stage weight of around 152. And I will say anything below 160, my body does not like. So
Yeah.
I will say, but also anything above like 175-ish, my body doesn't like. So the first, I would say 2 months of prep, they were pretty easy going because I was pushing my calories up quite a bit. I was, once again, when I was bulking, I got a little bit chubby. I got a little bit heavier than my body wanted to. So the first 2 months went pretty smoothly, lost probably about 10 pounds in those first 2 months. And then once again, uh, basically from then on out, I was aiming for right around 1 pound of weight loss per week. I did have a couple of refeeds built in there and basically, or diet breaks, you would call them. So essentially, I would continually be in a calorie deficit. And then when I felt like either once again, I lost a certain amount of weight or I just felt like mentally I was like really drained. I was feeling weak in the gym. Things just weren't going right. I would occasionally have a deload along with a diet break. So we kind of pull the volume back on my training as well as give my body a little bit more fuel to maximize recovery. Because that's one thing that we're always trying to balance is when we're in a calorie deficit, when we're in a cut, our recovery kind of like resource a little bit lower, right? We don't have the same amount of calories or protein or anything like that that we normally do. So therefore, we kind of are in like running on like I would say low energy. So we work in a couple diet breaks, refeeds, and then the big thing with once again it being a 9-month prep, which I think is kind of crazy for a lot of people to think about, but as a natural athlete, our biggest kind of hindrance is trying to maintain as much muscle as we can during the fat loss process. So a lot of we'll call professional bodybuilders, those that use some sort of enhancement, don't have to worry about their testosterone dropping. Don't have to worry about as much muscle loss. They can lose their fat a lot quicker. And Chris Bumstead, like guys that are once again 250, they can lose 30 pounds very easily versus someone who's under 200 pounds like myself. Like 30 pounds is a lot. It was once again, I can do the math off the top of my head, but like it was upwards of like 15 to 20% of my body weight was dropped during that cut. So we take a
Yeah.
much more slower, monotonous approach in order to once again maximize our muscle retention, minimize the side effects of a cut as far as like the hunger, the irritability, the I would say lower poor performance in the gym, stuff like that. And then I would say the last and then once again during that I would say the first 2 months pretty smooth. The next I would say month 3 to month 6 it was a difficult, but I've done cuts before. It's kind of just got to be consistent with things. But the last, I would say 2.5 months was where it really got to the point where it's like I was dropping below what my body wanted to be. I was getting into single digit body fat. And that's where it's not so much just the calorie deficit that starts to hurt, but like the low body fat, the testosterone drops, your libido drops, your energy drops, like all that kind of stuff. And then it becomes like that's a willpower game. Like that's just a matter of like, okay, like you committed to this, like, are you going to see it through or not? And it kind of becomes just a matter of like setting up your environment for success, making sure that you have pretty much a good support system. Like I was once again, like my girlfriend at the time, I was like, hey, like this is not going to be ideal, but this is not going to be forever either. Like it's going to be the next 2 months of probably no date nights. We still worked some things in earlier in the prep, which is once again why it was so long. But like the last 2 months, it was very, very strict and that kind of level of adherence that I don't think is really reasonable for most people in that situation. Like once again, I don't think I could do it with a family. I don't think I could do it with a kid. I don't think I could do it besides putting all of my energy to myself into that prep. So people that do it with once again family, maybe a kid, whatever it is, like more power to them. Because I think once again, being a young guy who has very I would say limited responsibilities, it was hard enough as it was just being able to focus on myself pretty much the whole time. So yeah, I guess we can dive into questions, but that's kind of like, yeah, a quick overview.
No, that's cool. No, I love all that. That's really good insight. I think it's cool to see because I up until really got into, when we started working with athletes like you and Alex Leonidas, you guys are the two guys that we work with specifically that I think just the two of you that really are the bodybuilding guys. And I didn't realize how like the mental fog and all that stuff that comes with all those things, you know what I mean? And all those, I mean, because you've been there. And
Yeah.
so like, I mean, like I was thinking about you talking about how you would have to do this really strict dieting. I'm thinking, man, when I would do like, a 22-mile run or something or a 23-mile run, like at least I knew it was going to be done in 3.5 hours. Right. And then I could
Sure.
go home and just eat whatever I wanted. But like you're
Yeah.
like when you're bodybuilding prepping, it's like and you're cutting, it's like you're just stuck. Like
Yeah.
you just have to deal with it and just grind it out. And so that's that's a lot of props to you guys because I don't know if I could ever I don't know if I have the ability to do that, you know.
Yeah. It's one of those things where you almost kind of just like as much as I tell, like once again with like working with my clients too, it's like we're trying to minimize hunger, but it's kind of gonna be there. It's just like
Right.
your body's natural response to being in a calorie deficit is going to be a little bit of hunger. But ways to minimize that are having once again good sleep, lean proteins, our fiber, high volume foods, stuff like that. But eventually gets to the point where, at least for myself and bodybuilding prep, like when you are sub 10% body fat, once again, some people have different, I would say, kind of like quote unquote like body set points. Like I know people that can live at 10% body fat and be fine. But I think for myself, it's like when I drop below 10, my body immediately starts to kind of fight and be like, yo, like, why are you doing this? Why are you not feeding
Yeah.
us? And even more to just like the extent of like, not only are you like, have you been in a calorie deficit? Because I can kind of deal with that hunger. Like I kind of accept it. I keep myself busy, whatever it is. But then when you get to a certain threshold or a certain level of leanness, then it just like starts to compound of just like, okay, like there is like no quick end in sight. This is going to be consistent for the next, for me, it was like 2 months because I competed in 4 different shows. So that was like over a month span. So I had to stay stage lean for almost like a full like 5 weeks straight. And that was probably the hardest part because as much as I once again like was able to compete and like have that kind of like, oh yeah, that was really fun. That was great. But it's like, oh shoot, like I do this again in a week or in 2 weeks. I don't get like it was hard because there's no like there's like, oh here you just competed. Normally people would go have their cheat days, whatever it is. It was like, oh no, I gotta like stay lean. I get like a little refeed. And then I have like once again another week or two of like just poverty calories as I called them and 15,000 steps and whatever else it was that we
Yeah.
were doing to stay that lean for that long. So I would say if anybody does compete, that's one thing. Don't do 4 shows in a row, maybe two, max three, but 4 shows was just by the end of it, I was just like, I don't even want to be here doing this right now. I just did this 3 times in a row. Um, but yeah, that's the only thing I look back on. I was like, damn, I wish I'd just done two, finished out in Seattle because I flew out to Seattle for my second show. And I was like, I wish I just could have ended it there, enjoyed my time. But instead yeah, we did 2 more shows after that.
Yeah. Wow. That's wild. All right, let's jump into some questions. We'll start off with Nate. I'm gonna ask Nate to unmute. All
Hey,
right, Nate.
can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. Go ahead, man.
Awesome. What's going on, Jack? Pleasure to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
So my question is, I'm kind of changing my workout routine a little bit to do an early morning workout before my 9 to 5 job. So my question is kind of around the whole fasted versus non-fasted workouts. Um, so I've kind of heard a couple different camps, and I know it's going to be kind of personalized based on your goals and things like that. But say my goals kind of geared towards hypertrophy training. Do I want to make sure, I'm getting right out of bed and into that bowl of oatmeal and some protein or something like that? Or
Yeah, so I would say so what I once again have trained early AMs in the past. I don't currently, but I would say I personally would go with what can you handle in terms of digestion. If you can have a little bit of carbs, a little bit of protein, something like that in your system and get a good workout in, not feel like you have like a ball in your stomach or any sort of like digestion issues, I highly recommend getting a little bit of food, a little bit of fuel because you haven't had anything to eat in probably maybe like 10 or 11 hours since dinner. So if your goal is hypertrophy, you want to maximize the train sessions, a little bit of, I would say just carbs is the primary goal in the morning would be great. But if that's something that's going to hinder your performance in the sense that you have those oats and you kind of just like something feels wrong in your stomach throughout your training, you feel like you're kind of like just have like, once again, whether it be a heavy stomach or you feel just like a little lethargic because of all those carbs or all that food, maybe go ahead and just have maybe a piece of fruit or something smaller. But it truly comes down to if you hit your protein and the adequate amount of calories in a day, that's gonna be the most important thing. But if you do want to maximize that training in the morning, a little bit of carbs can be beneficial if it doesn't hinder your digestion or hinder your workouts in the sense you have to go use the restroom or you feel like you have like just like a heavy weight in your stomach. Does that make sense?
yeah, no, absolutely. Awesome.
Cool.
Thank
And
you.
once again, I would say experiment with things. Once again, if you like want to try some protein in the morning, perfect. If that works for you, great. If that's maybe a little bit too heavy, maybe just start with like just a banana or just like a breakfast bar, something like that. That might be a little bit lighter and hopefully it can help you digest. And then you kind of play around with it from there. Maybe like increase the carbs a little bit over time and kind of modify that to see what best fits your personal digestion and energy level in the morning.
Yeah, right on. Awesome. Thank you.
Hydration too is absolutely key because you're waking up after also having not had any sort of fluids. So I do recommend my clients that train in the morning, if you can get some water in, maybe even with a little bit of electrolyte mixture to make sure you're not going to train dehydrated because that can have a huge impact on performance as well.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, next we have Chris Valine. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong, Chris.
No, you're good. That's correct. How's it going? I'm Chris. Nice to meet you guys.
Nice to meet you too.
So I have a question. So mine thing's based on the protein. So I'm roughly 250 pounds, probably 20% body fat. I'm a construction worker with, I remodel Walmarts, so I stay pretty active all night long, and then, go to the gym every day. People have told me the protein intake needs to be, 1.5 grams per body weight for me, up to 2 grams. But I feel some days I'm extremely active more than others. So if I'm intaking, the 375 grams of protein or the 500 grams of protein, but some days I'm less active, what happens with the protein? And does that go against, like, would it be caused with like the weight, like not losing weight? Cause I've been trying to cut and I'm not getting anywhere. And
Sure.
I mean, and not really drastically, I should say. And I understand like the pound or 2 pounds a week. 2 pounds is quite a bit, but a pound for sure. And I'm having, feel like I'm eating lean, turkey, chicken, some vegetables, eating your carbs, staying low on the fat, low on the carbs, high on protein.
Sure. So I will say, I do think that is a very excessive amount of protein. Just in general, once again, I'm not exactly sure where they got the 1.5 grams or the 2 grams, but I would say that's like maybe like a top tier Olympian bodybuilder, old school mentality of just the more protein, the better. Where I think
Okay.
in this case, it would be something where, once again, if you are closer to 20% body fat, it might be a better idea to go with like what you consider might be like your lean muscle mass. So instead of going with 250 and using those multipliers, if you think like, okay, if you're 20% body fat, you probably need to get close to like 200 to be quote unquote like that lean look. I'd maybe
Okay.
just go with like, if you want to use those multipliers, use 200 pounds instead. But I do think that for a guy like you, I would have, and if you're one of my clients, I would put you probably around, I would give you a range. I'd probably say 200 to 230 grams of protein. And then I would have most of your food probably be filled up with carbs to give you the energy to do your job. Because once again, you are extremely active, and you're like the excess protein, as you mentioned, your body will use that as energy. So it's one of those things where it can still be used as a vehicle for energy, even though carbs will your primary carbs, or carbs will your primary energy source. It will your body will tap into the protein that you consume to use it as energy when we don't have enough carbs. So I'd probably drop your protein by quite a bit, closer there, as I mentioned, like the 200, 230 range. If you love protein, okay, yeah, I'll let you eat 250. They'll probably increase the amount of carbs you're consuming to, once again, give you the energy for your day. Make sure that that is the primary energy source for your job and for that training. And then we go ahead and kind of, once again, I would say monitor your calories and your weight. And once again, if you're losing 1 to 2 pounds a week, I think that's a very, very good amount of weight to lose. It just comes down to, once again, staying consistent over a long period of time. But I think, once again, being 250, you probably get away with 2 pounds, around 1% of your body weight, and not have any side effects like extreme hunger, irritability, poor sleep, and stuff like that at that point, or that rate of weight loss.
Okay, yeah, because most of the information I got was like the local gym here in Idaho, another small local gym, and then one in Alaska, saying, you're extremely active. You need to be at 1.5 to 2 grams, which to me just seemed like it was. I mean, it's nonstop fillers, protein shakes, protein powders, and then lots of turkey and lots of chicken.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how, like, I don't even know how you could eat that much protein in one day. Like I like, props to you for being able to do that.
Yeah,
But I
that's
don't think
wild.
it's,
That is wild.
I like Lewis. I'm in my head. I'm like, how much chicken breast is that? Even with like, that's like what, maybe like 7 scoops of protein a day plus like lean proteins with each meal. Like, yeah,
Yeah,
I would
I know.
say,
I know I was drinking, buying cases of the Costco muscle milk or like the MRE stuff at 50 grams a drink. I'd have 3 or 4 drinks a day plus whatever protein and turkey just to try to consume, just to try to get up there. And what I thought somebody's professional opinion was.
yeah, I would
And
definitely say you got plenty more than enough protein. I think you aim for, once again, at 250, around 20% body fat. I would give my client a 200 to 230 range to be in, and then definitely get a little bit more carbs in your system. I think that would benefit not only like your training, but also like your work if you are that active, and then hopefully have a little bit more balance there in terms of hopefully maybe even better digestion. I don't know how you could digest upward 500 grams of protein. I think most people probably have issues with that. So maybe we can kind of work some easier digestible carbs in there. And then, once again, kind of monitor calories and your weight in general. But once again, yeah, I just think that's a lot of protein and just not necessary.
well, and I can say I've never hit the 500 grams, but I've definitely hit the 320 to 350 multiple days a week just to try to get something, because I just
Yeah.
thought 500 was obnoxious.
Yeah, no, I think most recent literature shows zero point 0.8 to 1 gram is more than enough to sustain active, once again, hypertrophy-based individuals in training. So I think, once again, and that's lean muscle mass as well for those studies. So I think 200 to 230 is a good range. And then if it's a habit of getting that much protein in, 250 is okay. But I definitely think getting some more carbs and fats in your system would definitely do you good and not have so much protein.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you.
Yep, no problem, Chris. Good luck with everything.
Yeah, that's wild. I mean, that the fact that's a feat in itself. I was impressed by you until I met Chris. Like,
Yeah.
that's 3 pounds of lean ground beef a day. And just like, I know this because I just did the math. I was trying to figure out which is cheaper, yogurt or ground beef to eat
Yeah.
based in our economic times. And I figured out lean ground beef is cheaper, right? If you buy it through Costco, whatever. But
Yeah, I'm
man,
in awe
props to
right
you,
now.
Chris. That's
Yeah,
impressive.
I
That
mean,
is
that's,
super
yeah,
impressive. His
that's,
thermogenic burn off the
yeah, I'll say
charts.
take that. I mean, that's some dedication. You put that dedication, once again, a little bit more carbs. I think your workouts will feel better. You have better pumps. And I think in general, yeah,
Can you
that's not,
call somebody a natural athlete if they're eating 375 grams of
no, I
protein a
think they're
day?
enhanced at that point. The
Yeah.
amount of meat they're taking, they're an animal at that point.
No, for sure. That's wild. Well, Chris, props to you, man. That's awesome. That's crazy. Cool. Well, why don't we can close this up a little bit, but just I would like you to mention that people don't know that you do a lot of recipes and stuff, and you're like kind of like a cook nerd. You know what I mean? When it
Yeah,
comes to
yes.
nutrition and fun, delicious. You're like that guy on Instagram that's like, if you mix, protein powder with cottage cheese and add a little turmeric,
Yeah.
it tastes exactly like a Snickers bar. You
Yeah,
know?
so I got started with some like full days of eating because once again, I think that was like the trend probably maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, that if it fits your macros trend. And I started gotten some full days of eating where I was like, okay, like I think people do enjoy watching that. I think that they can kind of overconsume it to the point where they think like, once again, if they follow someone who never eats vegetables because they like swear by them. But my goal with those full days of eating and like the recipes to show you that like there's a lot of variety out there. There are so many different protein sources, carb sources, fats, ways to combine meals that can still be healthy, but also very enjoyable and kind of have different, what we'll call like, once again, I would say like different palates can be kind of pleased with all different kinds of protein and have a mixture of, once again, like I like to say the replacement of proteins, carbs, and fats is almost like a 1-for-1. Like if you're eating chicken and rice and broccoli, why not eat maybe a little bit of shrimp with some pasta and Alfredo sauce? Okay, like you just took out, like, once again, the rice for pasta, the chicken for shrimp. Like there are all kinds of different combinations that you can make. And then I think like the full days of eating are just great ways to show, okay, like, hey, if you want to eat around 2,000 calories, I think I probably have probably a dozen different 2,000 calorie full days of eating now, each with probably about 100 to 150 to 200 grams of protein, with a variety of different protein sources, with maybe anywhere from 2 to 5 meals a day. So it shows once again that like there's not a one size fits all. There's a lot of ways to do it and get to your goal, calories, protein, whatever it might be. So I kind of make those now just as a fact of like showing people like you can use multiple ways to get to your goal, whatever that might be, and that there isn't a one size fits all approach, and that there's a lot of variety out there. And then yeah, I have a cookbook, which actually the second volume comes out in April 1st. Hopefully going to have 120 plus recipes in that, and just once again a combination of different proteins, different carbs, with a few, once again, I would say sauces, seasonings, special concoctions to make it taste really good, be palatable, but also once again lower calorie, higher protein versions of things.
Cool. Well, we appreciate you jumping on the call with us. This was super informational for sure. Um, or informative, as the English speakers say, because I just made up that word.
Yep.
But yeah, man, Jack, we really appreciate having you on, and we love you as an athlete, obviously, and it's really cool to have athletes that are willing to jump on and just give our customers and people who consume our products, information that helps them with their lifestyles, and just get better and refine and grow themselves as as that, what I call myself, an aspiring masters athlete. I know one day
Exactly.
yeah, one day I'll be like maybe a 70-year-old runner that can 70-year-old runner that can like beat an 80-year-old runner. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no,
So,
I think that I
that's
think
my
that's the
goal
end
is
goal. That should be a good end goal, right? Be a master's athlete. I mean, my goal, I think when I first started, I try to say it all the time, is like, I never want to say no because I physically can't do something. So that's kind of
right.
always the
Yeah.
goal. There are short-term goals along the way, bodybuilding prep, maybe it be like whatever, triathlons in the future, powerlifting, whatever it is. But the goal to never have a physical reason to not be able to do something, that's my end goal. When I'm older, when I have kids, grandkids, never have to say no to something because I physically can't do it. And I think if you have that like mindset of like the long term, like everything else is just for fun. Like bodybuilding prep, yeah, it sucked at times, but yeah, it was awesome at times to get shredded. But also it set a good standard of like, okay, I have the discipline to do certain things. I'm gonna be that 70-year-old, be able to play with his grandkids and play golf and do whatever I want, like, and not have to physically say no, or just not say no because I physically can't do something. I think that's a great approach for a lot of people when they are wondering about their why. Think about your future and what you want to be able to do, not have to let any limitations on your life and how you live.
Yeah, I will say, and for parents out there, I'm not a parent yet. My wife is pregnant,
Soon.
and we're having, yeah, I'm gonna be a
Congrats.
dad, a dad. I mean, I'm a dad, but I mean, have a baby that I actually have to take care of, that could
Yeah.
die, if I don't feed it. But my goal is like, it's really shifted to where it's like, now it's like, listen, like, my goal now is that my kids are gonna have to work hard to beat me. Like, my
Yeah.
goal is that I'm in a good enough shape that my boys or daughters or whatever, when they grow up, they want to go for a run, they're chasing dad. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And so like, that's like, I think that's super motivating. And I think that's in today's day and age where health is so, it's just so interesting to see in America how health is not taken very seriously by the majority of the population because they don't think about those long-term things. And I'm glad to work for a company and have customers that like, we make a product that essentially is partnering in that process, right? Where it's like, hey, look, like
Definitely.
you're trying to hit these goals. We want to make you close that work well. And as cheesy as that sounds, it really is. That's, you know, that's part of the reason why I come to work every day. You know, I just love the idea of being healthy and being able to be around for your grandkids and, you know, not have to worry about, you know, eventually having bad knees because, you know, I was overweight my whole life. So, yeah. So, well, we appreciate you, man. You know, thanks again for jumping on.
Of course.
Everybody, thank you for jumping on. We'll have a call next month with another athlete that we'll send an email out about. But so you guys have a great weekend. Thanks again, Jack. And
Thanks
we'll
for having me.
talk soon. Yep.
Sounds good. Take care, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.
Yeah.